I woke up late in the afternoon. For a second, I didn't know where I was. You know how it is, when you wake up in a strange place and wonder where in the world you are until memory comes rushing over you like a wave. I half convinced myself that I had dreamed everything that had happened the night before. I'm really home in bed, I thought. It's late and both Darry and Soda Pop are up. Darry's cooking breakfast, and in a minute he and Soda will come in and drag me out of bed and wrestle me down and tickle me until I think I'll die if they don't stop. It's me and Soda's turn to do the dishes after we eat, and then we'll all go outside and play football. Johnny and Two-Bit and I will get Darry on our side since Johnny and I are so small and Darry's the best player. It'll go like the usual weekend morning. I tried telling myself that while I lay on the cold rock floor wrapped up in Dally's jacket and listening to the wind rushing through the trees' dry leaves outside. Finally, I quit pretending and pushed myself up. I was stiff and sore from sleeping on that hard ground, but I had never slept so soundly. I was still groggy. I pushed off Johnny's jeans jacket, which had somehow gotten thrown across me, and blinked, scratching my head. It was awful quiet, with just the sound of rushing wind in the trees. Suddenly, I realized that Johnny wasn't there. Please stop here and answer question 1. Johnny! I called loudly, and that old wooden church echoed me. Annie, Annie. I looked around wildly, almost panic-stricken, but then caught sight of some crooked lettering written in the dust on the floor. Went to get supplies. Be back soon. J.C. I sighed and went to the pump to get a drink. The water from it was like liquid ice, and it tasted funny, but it was water. I splashed some on my face, and that woke me up pretty quick. I wiped my face off on Johnny's jacket and sat down on the back steps. The hill the church was on dropped off suddenly about 20 feet from the back door, and you could see for miles and miles. It was like sitting on top of the world. When you haven't got anything to do, you remember things in spite of yourself. I could remember every detail of the whole night, but it had the unreal quality of a dream. It seemed much longer than 24 hours since Johnny and I had met Dally at the corner of Pickett and Sutton. Maybe it was. Maybe Johnny had been gone a whole week and I had just slept. Maybe he had already been worked over by the fuzz and was waiting to get the electric chair since he wouldn't tell where I was. Maybe Dally had been killed in a car wreck or something and no one would ever know where I was, and I'd just die up here alone and turn into a skeleton. My overactive imagination was running away with me again. Sweat ran down my face and back and I was trembling. My head swam and I leaned back and closed my eyes. I guess it was partly delayed shock. Finally, my stomach calmed down and I relaxed a little, hoping that Johnny would remember cigarettes. I was scared, sitting there by myself. I heard someone coming up through the dead leaves toward the back of the church, and I ducked inside the door. Then I heard a whistle, long and low, ending in a sudden high note. I knew that whistle well enough. It was used by us in the shepherd's gang for "Who's there?" I returned it carefully, then darted out the door so fast that I fell up the steps and sprawled flat under Johnny's nose. I propped myself up on my elbows and grinned up at him. "Hey, Johnny, fancy meeting you here." He looked down at me over a big package. "I swear, Ponyboy, you're getting to act more like Two-Bit every day." I tried unsuccessfully to cock an eyebrow. "Who's acting?" I rolled over and sprang up, happy that someone was there. "What'd you get?" "Come inside. Dally told us to stay inside." We went in. Johnny dusted off the table with his jacket and started taking things out of the sack and lining them up neatly. "A week's supply of bologna, 2 loaves of bread, a box of matches," Johnny went on. I got tired of watching him do it all, so I started digging into the sack myself. Whee! I sat down on a dusty chair and started, "A paperback copy of Gone with the Wind. How'd you know I always wanted one?" Johnny reddened. "I remembered you saying something about it once, and me and you went to see that movie, remember? I thought you could maybe read it out loud and help kill time or something." "Gee, thanks." I put the book down reluctantly. I wanted to start it then. Peroxide? A deck of cards? Suddenly I realized something. "Johnny, you ain't thinking of—" Johnny sat down and pulled out a knife. "We're gonna cut our hair, and you're gonna bleach yours." He looked at the ground carefully. "They'll have our descriptions in the paper. We can't fit 'em." "Oh, no!" My hand flew to my hair. "No, Johnny, not my hair!" It was my pride. It was long and silky, just like Soda's, only a little redder. Our hair was tough. We didn't have to use much grease on it. Our hair labeled us greasers, too. It was our trademark, the one thing we were proud of. Maybe we couldn't have corvairs or madras shirts, but we could have hair. We'd have to anyway if we got caught. You know the first thing the judge does is make you get a haircut. I don't see why, I said sourly. Dally could just as easily mug somebody with short hair. I don't like it either. It's just a way of trying to break us. They can't really do anything to guys like Curly, Shepherd, or Tim. They've had about everything done to them. And they can't take anything away from them because they don't have anything in the first place, so they cut their hair. I looked at Johnny imploringly. Johnny sighed. I'm gonna cut mine too and wash the grease out, but I can't bleach it. I'm too dark-skinned to look okay blonde. Oh, come on, pony boy, he pleaded. It'll grow back. Okay, I said wide-eyed. Get it over with. Johnny flipped out the razor edge of his switch, took hold of my hair, and started sawing on it. I shuddered. Not too short, I begged. Johnny, please. Finally, it was over with. My hair looked funny, scattered on the floor in tufts. It's lighter than I thought it was, I said, examining it. Can I see what I look like now? No, Johnny said slowly, staring at me. We gotta bleach it first. After I'd sat in the sun for 15 minutes to dry the bleach, Johnny let me look in the old cracked mirror we'd found in a closet. I did a double take. My hair was even lighter than soda pops. I'd never combed it to the side like that. It just didn't look like me. It made me look younger, and scareder too. Boy, howdy, I thought. This really makes me look tough. I look like a blasted pansy. I was miserable. Johnny handed me the knife. He looked scared too. Cut the front and thin out the rest. I'll comb it back after I wash it. Johnny, I said tiredly, you can't wash your hair in that freezing water in this weather. You'll get a cold. He only shrugged. Go ahead and cut it. I did the best I could. He went ahead and washed it anyway, using the bar of soap he'd bought. I was glad I had to run away with him instead of Two-Bit or Steve or Jolly. That would be one thing they'd never think of. Soap. I gave him Dally's jacket to wrap up in, and he sat shivering in the sunlight in the back steps, leaning against the door, combing his hair back. It was the first time I could see that he had eyebrows. He didn't look like Johnny. His forehead was whiter where his bangs had been. It would have been funny if we hadn't been so scared. He was still shivering with cold. I guess, he said weakly, I guess we're disguised. I leaned back next to him suddenly. I guess so. Oh, shoot, Johnny said with a fake cheerfulness. It's just hair. Shoot nothing, I snapped. It took me a long time to get the hair just the way I wanted it. Besides, this just ain't us. It's like being in a Halloween costume we can't get out of. Well, we gotta get used to it, Johnny said with finality. We're in big trouble, and it's our looks or us. Please stop here and answer question 2. I started eating a candy bar. I'm still tired, I said. To my surprise, the ground blurred and I felt tears running down my cheeks. I brushed them off hurriedly. Johnny looked as miserable as I felt. I'm sorry I cut your hair off, pony boy. Oh, it ain't that, I said between bites of chocolate. I mean, not all of it. I'm just a little spooky. I really don't know what's the matter. I'm just mixed up. I know, Johnny said through chattering teeth as we went inside. Things have been happening so fast. I put my arm across his shoulders to warm him up. Two-Bit should have been in that little one-horse store. Man, we're in the middle of nowhere. The nearest house is 2 miles away. Things were laying out wide open, just waiting for somebody slick like Two-Bit to come and pick him up. He could have walked out with half the store. He leaned back beside me, and I could feel him trembling. Good old Two-Bit, he said in a quavering voice. He must have been as homesick as I was. Remember how he was wisecracking last night? I said. Last night. Just last night we were walking Cherry and Marcia over to Two-Bit's. Just last night we were laying in the lot, looking up at the stars and dreaming. Stop it! Johnny gasped from between clenched teeth. Shut up about last night. I killed a kid last night. He couldn't have been over 17 or 18 and I killed him. How'd you like to live with that? He was crying. I held him like Soda had held him the day we found him lying in the lot. I didn't mean to, he finally blurted out, but they were drowning you, and I was so scared. He was quiet for a minute. There sure is a lot of blood in people. He got up suddenly and began pacing back and forth, slapping his pockets. What are we going to do? I was crying by then. It was getting dark and I was cold and lonesome. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back, but the tears came anyway. "This is my fault," Johnny said in a miserable voice. He had stopped crying when I started. "For bringing a little 13-year-old kid along. You ought to go home. You can't get into any trouble. You didn't kill him." "No!" I screamed at him. "I'm 14. I've been 14 for a month, and I'm in it as much as you are. I'll stop crying in a minute. I can't help it." He slumped down beside me. "I didn't mean it like that, Pony Boy. Don't cry, Pony. We'll be okay. Don't cry." I leaned against him and bawled until I went to sleep. I woke up late that night. Johnny was resting against the wall, and I was asleep on his shoulder. "Johnny?" I yawned. "You awake?" I was warm and sleepy. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We ain't gonna cry no more, are we?" "Nope. We all cried out now. We're getting used to the idea. We're gonna be okay now." "That's what I thought," I said drowsily. Then, for the first time since Darry and I had sat behind those girls at the nightly double, I relaxed. We could take whatever was coming now. Please stop here and answer question 3. The next 4 or 5 days were the longest days I had ever spent in my life. We killed time by reading Gone with the Wind and playing poker. Johnny sure did like that book, although he didn't know anything about the Civil War and even less about plantations, and I had to explain a lot of it to him. It amazed me how Johnny could get more meaning out of some of the stuff in there than I could. I was supposed to be the deep one. Johnny had failed a year in school and never made good grades. He couldn't grasp anything that was shoved at him too fast, and I guess his teachers thought he was just plain dumb, but he wasn't. He was just a little slow to get things, and he liked to explore things once he did get them. He was especially stuck on the Southern gentlemen, impressed with their charm and manners. "I bet they were cool old guys," he said, his eyes glowing, after I read the part about them riding into sure death because they were gallant. "They remind me of Dally." "Dally?" I said, startled. "Shoot, he ain't got any more manners than I do, and you saw how he treated those girls the other night. So does more like them Southern boys." "Yeah, in the manners bit and the charm too, I guess," Johnny said slowly. "But one night I saw Dally getting picked up by the fuzz, and he kept real cool and calm the whole time. They was getting him for breaking out the windows in the school building, and it was Two-Bit who did that, and Dally knew it. But he just took the sentence without batting an eye or even denying it. That's gallant." That was the first time I realized the extent of Johnny's hero worship for Dally Winston. Of all of us, Dally was the one I liked least. He didn't have Soda's understanding or Dash or Two-Bit's humor or even Darry's Superman qualities, but I realized that these three appealed to me because they were like the heroes in the novels I read. Dally was real. I liked my books and clouds and sunsets. Dally was so real, he scared me. Please stop here and answer question 4. Johnny and I never went to the front of the church. You could see the front from the road, and sometimes farm kids rode their horses by on their way to the store. So we stayed in the very back, usually sitting on the steps and looking across the valley. We could see for miles, see the ribbon of highway and the small dots that were houses and cars. We couldn't watch the sunset since the back faced east, but I loved to look at the colors of the fields and the soft shadings of the horizon. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Johnny and I slept huddled together for warmth. Dally had been right when he said it could get cold where we were going. Being careful not to wake Johnny up, I went to sit on the steps and smoke a cigarette. The dawn was coming then. All the lower valley was covered with mist, and sometimes little pieces of it broke off and floated away in small clouds. The sky was lighter in the east, and the horizon was a thin golden line. The clouds changed from gray to pink, and the mist was touched with gold. It was a silent moment, when everything held its breath, and then the sun rose. It was beautiful. "Golly!" Johnny's voice beside me made me jump. "That sure was pretty." "Yeah," I sighed, wishing I had some paint to do a picture while the sight was still fresh in my mind. "The mist was what was pretty," Johnny said, all gold and silver. "Mm-hmm," I said, trying to blow a smoke ring. "Too bad it couldn't stay like that all the time." "Nothing gold can stay." I was remembering a poem I read once. "What?" "Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay." Johnny was staring at me. Where'd you learn that? That's what I meant. Robert Frost wrote it. He meant more to it than I'm getting it, though. I was trying to find out the meaning the poem had in mind, but it eluded me. I always remembered it because I never quite got what he meant by it. You know, Johnny said slowly, I never noticed colors and clouds and stuff until you kept reminding me about them. Seems like they were never there before. He thought for a minute. Your family sure is funny. And what happens to be so funny about it? I asked Johnny stiffly. Johnny looked at me quickly. I didn't mean nothing. I meant, well, Soda kind of looks like your mother did, but he acts exactly like your father. And Darry is a spitting image of your father, but he ain't wild and laughing all the time like he was. He acts like your mother. And you don't act like either one. I know, I said. Well, I said, thinking this over, you ain't like any of the gang. I mean, I couldn't tell Two-Bit or Steve or even Darry about the sunrise and clouds and stuff. I couldn't even remember that poem around them. I mean, they just don't dig. Just you and Soda Pop, and maybe Cherry Bounce. Johnny shrugged. Yeah, he said with a sigh. I guess we're different. Shoot, I said, blowing a perfect smoke ring. Maybe they are. By the fifth day, I was so tired of bologna I nearly got sick every time I looked at it. We'd eaten all our candy bars in the first 2 days. I was dying for a Pepsi. I'm what you might call a Pepsi addict. I drink them like a fiend, and going for 5 days without one was about to kill me. Johnny promised to get some if we ran out of supplies and had to get some more, but that didn't help me right then. I was smoking a lot more there than I usually did, I guess because it was something to do, although Johnny warned me that I would get sick smoking so much. We were careful with their cigarettes. If that old church ever caught fire, there'd be no stopping it. On the fifth day, I had revved up to Sherman's siege of Atlanta and Gone with the Wind, owed Johnny $150 for poker games, smoked 2 packs of Camels, and, as Johnny had predicted, got sick. I hadn't eaten anything all day, and smoking on an empty stomach doesn't make you feel real great. I curled up in a corner to sleep off the smoke. I was just about asleep when I heard, as if from a great distance, a low, long whistle that went off in a sudden high note. I was too sleepy to pay any attention, although Johnny didn't have any reason to be whistling like that. He was sitting on the back steps trying to read Gone with the Wind. I'd almost decided that I had dreamed the outside world and there was nothing real but bologna sandwiches and the Civil War and the old church and the mist in the valley. It seemed to me that I had always lived in that church, or maybe lived during the Civil War and had somehow gotten transplanted. That shows you what a wild imagination I have. A toe nudged me in the ribs. Glory, said a rough but familiar voice. He looks different with his hair like that. I rolled over and sat up, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes and yawning. Suddenly I blinked. Hey, Dally. Hey, pony boy. He grinned down at me, or should I say Sleeping Beauty? I never thought I'd live to see the day when I would be so glad to see Dally Winston, but right then he meant one thing, contact with the outside world. And it suddenly became real and vital. Have a soda pop. Are the fuzz after us? Is Darry all right? Do the boys know where we are? What? Hold on, kid. Dally broke in. I can't answer everything at once. You two want to go get something to eat first? I skipped breakfast and I'm about starved. You're starved? Johnny was so indignant he nearly squeaked. I remembered the bologna. Is it safe to go out? I asked eagerly. Yep. Dally searched his shirt pocket for a cigarette and finding none, said, Got a cancer stick, Johnny Cake? Johnny tossed him a whole package. The foes won't be looking for you around here, Dally said, lighting up. They think you've lit out for Texas. I got Buck's T-Bird parked down the road a little way. Gosh almighty, boys, ain't you been eating anything? Johnny looked startled. Yeah, whatever gave you the idea we ain't? Dally shook his head. You're both pale, and you've lost weight. After this, get out in the sun more. You look like you've been through the mill. I started to say, look who's talking, but decided it would be safer not to. Dally needed a shave. A stubble of colorless beard covered his jaw, and he looked like he was the one who had been sleeping in his clothes for a week instead of us. I knew he hadn't seen a barber in months, but it was safe not to get mouthy with Dally Winston. Hey, pony boy. He fumbled with the piece of paper in the back pocket. I got a letter for you. A letter? From whom? The president, of course, stupid. It's from Soda. Soda Pop? I said, bewildered. But how did he know? He came over to Buck's a couple days ago for something and found that sweatshirt. I told him I didn't know where you were, but he didn't believe me. He gave me this letter and half his paycheck to give to you. Kid, you ought to see Darry. He's taking this mighty hard. I wasn't listening. I leaned back against the side of the church and read. Pony Boy. Well, I guess you got into some trouble, huh? Darry and me nearly went nuts when you ran out like that. Darry's awful sorry he hit you. You know he didn't mean it. And then you and Johnny turn up missing, and what with that dead kid in the park and Dally getting hauled into the station, well, it scared us something awful. The police came by to question us, and we told them as much as we could. I can't believe little old Johnny could kill somebody. I know Dally knows where you are, but you know him. He keeps his trap shut and won't tell me nothing. Darry hasn't gotten the slightest notion where you're at, and it's nearly killing him. I wish you'd come back and turn yourselves in, but I guess you can't, since Johnny might get hurt. You sure are famous. You got a paragraph in the newspaper, even. Take care, and say hi to Johnny for us. Soda Pop Curtis. Please stop here and answer question 5. He could improve his spelling, I thought after reading it through 3 or 4 times. How come you got hauled in? I asked Dally. Shoot, kid, he grinned wolfishly. Them boys at the station know me by now. I get hauled in for anything that happens in our turf. While I was there, I kind of let it slip that y'all were heading for Texas, so that's where they're looking. He took a drag on his cigarette and cussed it good-naturedly for not being a cool. Johnny listened in admiration. You sure can cuss good, Dally. Sure can. Dally agreed wholeheartedly, proud of his vocabulary. But don't you kids get to picking up my bad habits. He gave me a hard rub on the head. Kid, I swear it don't look like you with all your hair cut off. You used to look tough. You and Soda had the coolest looking hair in town. I know, I said sourly. I look lousy, but don't rub it in. Do you all want something to eat or not? Johnny and I leapt up. You better believe it. Gee, Johnny said wistfully, sure'll be good to get into a car again. Well, Dally drawled, I'll give you a ride for your money. Dally always did like to drive fast, as if he didn't care whether he got where he was going or not, and we came down the dirt road off J Mountain doing 85. I like driving fast, and Johnny was crazy about drag races, but we both got a little green around the gills when Dally took a corner on 2 wheels with the brakes screaming. Maybe it was because we hadn't been in a car for so long. We stopped at the Dairy Queen, and the first thing I got was a Pepsi. Johnny and I gorged on barbecue sandwiches and banana splits. Glory! Dallas said, amazed, watching us gulp the stuff down. You don't need to make like every mouthful's your last. I got plenty of money. Take it easy. I don't want you getting sick on me. I thought I was hungry. Johnny merely ate faster. I didn't slow down until I got a headache. I didn't tell you all something, Dally said, finishing his 3rd hamburger. The Socias and us are having an all-out warfare all over the city. That kid you killed had plenty of friends, and it's all over town. It's the Socias against Greece. Can't walk alone at all. I started carrying a heater. Dally, I said, frightened. You kill people with heaters. You kill them with switchblades too, don't you, kid? Dally said in a hard voice. Johnny gulped. Don't worry, Dally went on. It ain't loaded. I ain't aiming to get picked up for murder, but it sure does help a bluff. Tim Shepard's gang and our outfit are having it out with the Socials tomorrow night at the vacant lot. We got hold of the president of one of their social clubs and had a war council. Yeah. Dally sighed, and I knew he was remembering New York. Just like the good old days. If they win, things go on as usual. If we do, they stay out of our territory for good. 2-Bits got jumped a few days ago. Darry and me came along in time, but he wasn't having too much trouble. 2-Bits a good fighter. Hey, I didn't tell you, we got us a spy. A spy? Johnny looked up from his banana split. Who? That good-looking broad I tried to pick up that night you killed the Soch. The redhead, Sherry, what's her name? Please stop here and answer question 6. Chapter 6. Johnny gagged, and I almost dropped my hot fudge sundae. Cherry? We both said at the same time. The Soch? Yeah, Dally said. She came over to the vacant lot the night 2-Bit was jumped. Shepard and some of his outfit and us were hanging around there when she drives up in her little Stingray. That took a lot of nerve. Some of us was for jumping her then and there, she being the dead kid's girl and all, but 2-Bit stopped us. Man, next time I want a broad, I'll pick up my own kind. Yeah. Johnny said slowly, and I wondered if, like me, he was remembering another voice, also tough, and just deepening into manhood, saying, "Next time you want a broad, pick up your own kind." It gave me the creeps. Dally was going on. She said she felt that the whole mess was her fault, which it is, and that she'd keep up with what was coming off with the Socs and the Rumble, and would testify that the Socs were drunk and looking for a fight, and you fought back in self-defense. He gave a grim laugh. "That little girl sure does hate me." I offered to take her over to the Dingo for a Coke, and she said no thank you and told me where I could go in very polite terms. She was afraid of loving you, I thought. So, Cherry Valance, the cheerleader, Bob's girl, the Soc, was trying to help us. No, it wasn't Cherry the Soc who was helping us. It was Cherry the dreamer, who watched sunsets and couldn't stand fights. It's hard to believe a Soc would help us, even a Soc that dug sunsets. Dally didn't notice. He had forgotten about it already. Please stop here and answer question 7. Man, this place is out of it. What do they do for kicks around here? Play checkers? Dally surveyed the scene without interest. I ain't never been in the country before. Have you two? Johnny shook his head, but I said, Dad used to take us all hunting. I've been in the country before. How'd you know about the church? I got a cousin that lives around here somewheres. Tipped me off that it'd make a tough hideout in case of something. Hey, Pony Boy, I heard you was the best shot in the family. Yeah, I said. Darry always got the most ducks, though, him and Dad. Soda and I goofed around too much, scared most of our game away. I couldn't tell Dally that I hated to shoot things. He'd think I was soft. It was a good idea. I mean, cutting your hair and bleaching it. They printed your descriptions in the paper, but you sure wouldn't fit 'em now. Johnny had been quietly finishing his 5th barbecue sandwich, but now he announced, "We're going back and turning ourselves in." It was Dally's turn to gag. Then he swore a while. Then he turned to Johnny and demanded, "What?" I said, "We're going back and turn ourselves in," Johnny repeated in a quiet voice. I was surprised, but not shocked. I thought about turning ourselves in lots of times, but apparently the whole idea was a jolt to Dallas. "I got a good chance of being let off easy," Johnny said desperately, and I didn't know if it was Dally he was trying to convince, or himself. "I ain't got no record with the fuzz, and it was self-defense. Ponyboy and Cherry can testify to that, and I don't aim to stay in that church all my life." That was quite a speech for Johnny. His big black eyes grew bigger than ever at the thought of going to the police station, for Johnny had a deathly fear of cops. But he went on. We won't tell that you helped us, Dally, and we'll give you back the gun and what's left of the money, and say we hitchhiked back so you won't get into trouble, okay?" Dally was chewing the corner of his ID card, which gave his age as 21 so he could buy liquor. "You sure you want to go back? Us greasers get it worse than anyone else." Johnny nodded. "I'm sure. It ain't fair for Ponyboy to have to stay up in that church with Darry and Soda worrying about him all the time. I don't guess—" He swallowed and tried not to look eager. "I don't guess my parents are worried about me or anything." Please stop here and answer question 8. "The boys are worried," Dally said in a matter-of-fact voice. "Two-Bit was going to Texas to hunt for you." "My parents," Johnny repeated doggedly. "Did they ask about me?" "No," snapped Dally. "They didn't. Blast it, Johnny. What do they matter? Shoot, my old man don't give a hang whether I'm in jail or dead in a car wreck or drunk in the gutter. That don't bother me none." Johnny didn't say anything, but he stared at the dashboard with such hurt bewilderment that I could have bawled. Dally cussed under his breath and nearly tore out the transmission of the T-Bird as we roared out of the Dairy Queen. I felt sorry for Dally. He meant it when he said he didn't care about his parents, but he and the rest of the gang knew Johnny cared and did everything they could to make it up to him. I don't know what it was about Johnny, maybe that lost puppy look or those big scared eyes, that made everybody his big brother, but they couldn't, no matter how hard they tried, take the place of his parents. I thought about it for a minute. Darry and Soda Pop were my brothers, and I loved both of them, even if Darry did scare me, but not even Soda could take Mom and Dad's place, and they were my real brothers, not just sort of adopted ones. No wonder Johnny was hurt because his parents didn't want him. Dally could take it. Dally was of the breed that could take anything because he was hard and tough, and when he wasn't, he could turn hard and tough. Johnny was a good fighter and can play it cool, but he was sensitive, and that isn't a good way to be when you're a greaser. "Blast it, Johnny!" Dally growled as we flew along the red road. Why didn't you think of turning yourself in 5 days ago? It would have saved a lot of trouble. I was scared, Johnny said with conviction. I still am. He ran his finger down one of his short black sideburns. I guess we ruined our hair for nothing, pony boy. I guess so. I was glad we were going back. I was sick of that church. I didn't care if I was bald. Darry was scowling, and from long and painful experience I knew better than to talk to him when his eyes were blazing like that. I'd likely as not get clobbered over the head. That happened before, just as it had happened to all the gang one time or another. We rarely fought amongst ourselves. Darry was the unofficial leader since he kept his head best. Soda and Steve had been best friends since grade school and never fought, and Two-Bit was just too lazy to argue with anyone. Johnny kept his mouth shut too much to get into any arguments, and nobody ever fought with Johnny. I kept my mouth shut too, but Darry was a different matter. If something beefed him, he didn't keep quiet about it, and if you rubbed him the wrong way, look out. Not even Darry wanted to tangle with him. He was dangerous. Johnny just sat there and stared at his feet. He hated for any one of us to be mad at him. He looked awful sad. Darry glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. I looked out the window. Johnny, Darry said in a pleading, high voice, using a tone I'd never heard from him before. Johnny, I ain't mad at you. I just don't want you to get hurt. You don't know what a few months in jail can do to you. Oh, blast it, Johnny. He pushed his white blonde hair back out of his eyes. You get hardened in jail. I don't want that to happen to you, like it happened to me. I kept staring out of the window at the rapidly passing scenery, but I felt my eyes getting round. Darry never talked like that. Never. Darry didn't give a Yankee dime about anyone but himself, and he was cold and hard and mean. He never talked about his past or being in jail that way. If he talked about it at all, it was to brag. And I suddenly thought of Darry, in jail at the age of 10. Darry, growing up in the streets. Please stop here and answer question 9. Would you rather have me living in hideouts for the rest of my life, always on the run? Johnny asked seriously. If Darry had said yes, Johnny would have gone back to the church without hesitation. He figured Darry knew more than he did, and Darry's word was law, but he never heard Darry's answer, for we had reached the top of J Mountain, and Darry suddenly slammed on the brakes and stared. Oh, glory, he whispered. The church was on fire. Let's go see what the deal is, I said, hopping out. What for? Darry sounded irritated. Get back in here before I beat your head in. I knew Darry would have to park the car and catch me before he could carry out his threat, and Johnny was already out and following me, so I figured I was safe. We could hear him cussing us out, but he wasn't mad enough to come after us. There was a crowd at the front of the church, mostly little kids, and I wondered how they'd gotten there so quickly. I tapped the nearest grown-up. What's going on? Well, we don't know for sure, the man said with a good-natured grin. We were having a school picnic up here, and the first thing we knew, the place was burning up. Thank goodness this is the wet season, and the old thing is worthless anyway. Then, to the kids, he shouted, Stand back, children! The firemen will be coming soon! I bet we started it, I said to Johnny. We must have dropped a lighted cigarette or something. About that time, a lady came running up. Jerry, some of the kids are missing. They're probably around here somewhere. You can't tell with all this excitement where they might be. No, she shook her head. They've been missing for at least half an hour. I thought they were climbing the hill. Then we all froze. Faintly, just faintly, you could hear someone yelling, and it sounded like it was coming from inside the church. The woman went white. I told them not to play in the church. I told them. She looked like she was going to start screaming, so Jerry shook her. I'll get them. Don't worry. I started as a dead run for the church, and the man caught my arm. I'll get them. You kids stay out. I jerked loose and ran on. All I could think was, we started it. We started it. We started it. I wasn't about to go through the flaming door, so I slammed a big rock through a window and pulled myself in. It was a wonder I didn't cut myself to death, now that I think about it. Hey, pony boy! I looked around, startled. I hadn't realized Johnny had been right behind me all the way. I took a deep breath and started coughing. The smoke filled my eyes and they started watering. Is that guy coming? Johnny shook his head. The window stopped him. Too scared? Nah, Johnny gave me a grin. Too fat. I couldn't laugh because I was scared I'd drown in the smoke. The roar and crackling was getting louder and Johnny shouted the next question. Where are the kids? In the back, I guess, I hollered, and we started stumbling through the church. I should be scared, I thought, with an odd detached feeling, but I'm not. The cinders and embers began falling on us, stinging and smarting like ants. Suddenly, in the red glow and the haze, I remembered wondering what it was like in a burning ember, and I thought, now I know. It's a red hell. Why aren't I scared? We pushed open the door to the back room and found 4 or 5 little kids about 8 years old or younger huddled in a corner. One was screaming his head off, and Johnny yelled, "Shut up, we're going to get you out." The kid looked surprised and quit hollering. I blinked myself. Johnny wasn't behaving at all like his old self. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the door was blocked by flames and then pushed open the window and tossed out the nearest kid. I caught one quick look at his face. It was red-marked from falling embers and sweat streaks, but he grinned at me. He wasn't scared either. That was the only time I can think of when I saw him without that defeated, suspicious look in his eyes. He looked like he was having the time of his life. Please stop here and answer question 10. I picked up a kid and he promptly bit me, but I leaned out the window and dropped him as gently as I could, being in a hurry like that. A crowd was there by that time. Darry was standing there, and when he saw me, he screamed, "For Pete's sake, get out of there! The roof's going to cave in any minute! Forget those blasted kids!" I didn't pay any attention, although pieces of the old roof were crashing down too close for comfort. I snatched up another kid, hoping he didn't bite, and I dropped him without waiting to see if he landed okay or not. I was coughing so hard I could hardly stand up, and I wish I had time to take off Dally's jacket. It was hot. We dropped the last of the kids out as the front of the church started to crumble. Johnny shoved me towards the window. "Get out!" I leaped out the window and heard timber crashing and the flames roaring right behind me. I staggered, almost falling, coughing and sobbing for breath. Then I heard Johnny scream, and as I turned to go back for him, Darry swore at me and clubbed me across the back as hard as he could, and I went down into a peaceful darkness. When I came to, I was being bounced around and ached and smarted and wondered dimly where I was. I tried to think, but there was a high-pitched screaming going on, and I couldn't tell whether it was inside my head or out. Then I realized it was a siren. The fuzz, I thought dully. The cops have come for us. I tried to swallow a groan and wished wildly for soda. Someone with a cold, wet rag was gently sponging off my face, and a voice said, "I think he's coming round." I opened my eyes. It was dark. I'm moving. I thought, are they taking me to jail? Where? I said hoarsely, not able to get anything else out of my mouth. My throat was sore. I blinked at the stranger sitting beside me, but he wasn't a stranger. I'd seen him before. "Take it easy, kid. You're in an ambulance." "Where's Johnny?" I cried, frightened at being in this car with strangers. "And Dallas?" "They're in the other ambulance, right behind us. Just calm down. You're going to be okay. You passed out." "I didn't either," I said in a bored, tough voice we reserved for strangers and cops. "Dallas hit me. How come?" "Because your back was in flames. That's why." I was surprised. "It was? Golly, I didn't feel a thing. It don't hurt." "We put it out before you got burned. That jacket saved you from a bad burning, maybe saved your life. You just keeled over from smoke inhalation and a little shock. Of course, that slap on the back didn't help much." I remembered who he was then. Jerry somebody or other who was too heavy to get in the window. He must have been a schoolteacher, I thought. "Are you taking us to the police station?" I was still a little mixed up as to what was coming off. "The police station?" It was his turn to be surprised. "What would we want to take you to the police station for? We're taking all three of you to the hospital." I let his first remark slide by. "Are Johnny and Darry all right?" "Which one's which?" "Johnny has black hair. Darry's a mean-looking one." He studied his wedding ring. Maybe he's thinking about his wife, I thought. I'd wish he'd say something. "We think the tow-headed kid is going to be all right. He burned one arm pretty badly, though, trying to drag out the other kid out the window. Johnny, well, I don't know about him. A piece of timber caught him across the back. He might have a broken back, and he was burned pretty severely. He passed out before he got out the window. They're giving him plasma now." He must have seen the look on my face, because he hurriedly changed the subject. "I swear, you three are the bravest kids I'd seen in a long time. First you and the black-haired kid climbing in that window, and then the tough-looking kid going back in to save him. Mrs. O'Brien and I think you were sent straight from heaven. Or are you just professional heroes or something?" Sent from heaven? Had he gotten a good look at Dallas? "No, we're greasers," I said. I was too worried and scared to appreciate the fact that he was trying to be funny. "You're what?" "Greasers. You know, like hoods, JDs. Johnny's wanted for murder, and Dallas has a record with the fuzz a mile long." "Are you kidding me?" Jerry stared at me as if he thought I was still in shock or something. I'm not. Take me to town and you'll find out pretty quick. Please stop here and answer question 11. We're taking you to the hospital there anyway. The address card in your billfold said that's where you lived. Your name's really Pony Boy? Yeah, even on my birth certificate, and don't bug me about it. I felt weak. Are the little kids okay? Just fine. A little frightened, maybe. There were some short explosions right after you all got out. Sounded just exactly like gunfire. Gunfire. There went our gun, and gone with the wind. Were we sent from heaven? I started to laugh weakly. I guess that guy knew how close to hysterics I really was, for he talked to me in a low, soothing voice, all the way to the hospital. I was sitting in the waiting room, waiting to hear how Darry and Johnny were. I had been checked over, and except for a few burns and a big bruise across my back, I was all right. I'd watched them bring Darry and Johnny in on stretchers. Darry's eyes were closed, but when I spoke, he had tried to grin and had told me that if I ever did a stupid thing like that, he'd beat the tar out of me. He was still swearing at me when they took him in. Johnny was unconscious. I'd been afraid to look at him, but I was relieved to see that his face wasn't burned. He just looked very pale and still and sort of sick. I would have cried at the sight of him, so still, except I couldn't in front of the people. Jerry Wood had stayed with me all the time. He kept thanking me for getting the kids out. He didn't seem to mind our being hoods. I told him the whole story, starting when Dallas and Johnny and I had met at the corner of Pickett and Sutton. I left out the part about the gun and our hitching a ride in the freight car. He was real nice about it, and said that being heroes would help us get out of troubles, especially since it was self-defense and all. I was sitting there, smoking a cigarette, when Jerry came back in from making a phone call. He stared at me for a second. You shouldn't be smoking. I was startled. How come? I looked at my cigarette. It looked okay to me. I looked around for a no smoking sign and couldn't find one. How come? Why, Jerry stammered, you're too young. I am? I never thought about it. Everyone in our neighborhood, even the girls, smoked, except for Darry, who was too proud of his athletic health to risk a cigarette. We had all started smoking at an early age. Johnny had been smoking since he was 9. Steve started at 11, so no one thought it was unusual when I started. I was the weed fiend in my family. Soda smokes only to steady his nerves or when he wants to look tough. Jerry simply sighed, then grinned. There are some people here to see you. Claim to be your brothers or something. I leapt up and ran for the door, but it was already open, and Soda had me in a bear hug and was swinging me around. I was so glad to see him, I could have bawled. Finally, he set me down and looked at me. He pushed my hair back. Oh, Pony Boy, your hair! Your tough, tough hair! Then I saw Darry. He was leaning in the doorway, wearing his olive jeans and black t-shirt. He was still tall, broad-shouldered Darry, but his fists were jammed in his pockets and his eyes were pleading. I simply looked at him. He swallowed and said in a husky voice, Pony Boy. I let go of Soda and stood there for a minute. Darry didn't like me. He had driven me away that night. He had hit me. Darry hollered at me all the time. He didn't give a hang about me. Suddenly, I realized, horrified, that Darry was crying. He didn't make a sound, but tears were running down his cheeks. I hadn't seen him cry in years, not even when Mom and Dad had been killed. I remembered the funeral. I had sobbed in spite of myself. Soda had broken down and bawled like a baby, but Darry had only stood there, his fists in his pockets and that look on his face, the same helpless, pleading look that he was wearing now. Please stop here and answer question 12. In that second, what Soda and Darry and Two-Bit had been trying to tell me came through. Darry did care about me, maybe as much as he cared about Soda, and because he cared, he was trying too hard to make something of me. When he yelled, Pony, where you've been all this time? He meant, Pony, you scared me to death. Please be careful, because I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you. Darry looked down and turned away silently. Suddenly, I broke out of my daze. Darry! I screamed, and the next thing I knew I had him around the waist and was squeezing the daylights out of him. Darry, I said, I'm sorry. He was stroking my hair, and I could hear the sobs racking him as he fought to keep the tears back. "Oh, Pony, I thought we'd lost you, like we did Mom and Dad." That was a silent fear then, of losing another person he loved. I remember how close he and Dad had been, and I wondered, how could I ever have thought him hard and unfeeling? I listened to his heart pounding through his t-shirt and knew everything was going to be okay now. I had taken the long way around, but I was finally home, to stay. Please stop here and answer question 13.